Welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. We have a bunch of questions that were submitted already. A bunch of people already here in the Hangout ready to ask questions, I'm sure. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst at Google. That essentially means I talk to webmasters, people like you, and I talk to our engineers and make sure that we're kind of doing the right thing on both sides. Before we get started with the questions that were submitted, do any of you want to ask a first question? Don't be shy.
I can ask, but you probably won't really answer. So Matt Cutts said Thursday night that they're rolling out the payday loan update, but it seems like nobody really in that category noticed anything changing, whereas people said it seems like those impacted by Panda 4 saw a change in their rankings Thursday night into Friday morning. Do you have any insight into that at all that you could share?
I don't have any details that I can share on that. Sometimes when we start rolling out these algorithms, we do that incrementally. It's not that we go from 0 to 100% from one day to the next. So maybe this is something that's just slightly ramping up, and you'll see more of the changes over time. Sometimes I also notice something at last minute that kind of prevents them from switching it on completely, and they roll it back for a couple of days to make sure that they can get things working the way they really should be working, and then they can reactivate it again. So that's also a possibility.
Thank you. I also wanted to commend you guys on the new note from a reviewer feature that you added to Google's rejection notices on reconsideration requests. I've already seen a few. The question is, people are asking me, on average, what percentage of the rejection notices that you're going to send are going to have a note from a reviewer? I assume you have no clue at this point, but I assume you're going to want to use it as often as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any metrics on something that we haven't used before, so that's kind of tricky. I don't think we have any target that we're aiming for, where we're saying we want to send this many percent of the reconsideration requests a personal notice, but we do try to use that where we can to make sure that people are going in the right direction and that they're not just running around in circles trying to resolve an issue that they've come into.
Cool. I know. I appreciate it. The information that comes out of that is extremely useful, so I appreciate you guys adding that.
Yeah, thanks. I'll pass that on to the guys. All right. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we have here. If a site has 5,000 pages and has a Panda quality issue, would it be a terrible idea if you no-index everything but 20 pages of quality as a starting point and then start refreshing the old pages with good quality page by page? Would this immediately fix Panda? So I think, depending on your website, this could be a good idea. This could be a catastrophic idea. It kind of depends on the kind of content that you have there, the kind of website that you have, whether or not those 5,000 pages are really useful content that just aren't quite up to par, or if they're really bad pages. If they're really bad pages that you don't want to be associated with, then removing them and making sure that they're clean before you actually make them live again is a great idea. But if they're kind of reasonable pages and they're just not perfect, then that's something where I'd probably try to keep those pages and work on improving them rather than deleting them completely. With regards to fixing issues from a quality algorithm like Panda, that's something where you probably wouldn't see an immediate effect, so it's not from one day to the next that this would happen. On the one hand, we have to recrawl those pages to realize that they're actually removed. On the other hand, these algorithms have to kind of reprocess the data over time to actually start using that for the next kind of data push that we see.
So, hey, John. That was my question. I was just wondering that, one of the biggest problems is people trying to understand where the Panda issue actually is. And so I did wonder whether, if you did remove pretty much everything. Is my microphone very low, by the way? Is my microphone low?
Oh, it's good now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wondered whether or not, if you did remove a majority of the pages, that it's one of the only signals you can really kind of find where, you can say to yourself, right, let's just concentrate on everything. And if you did just remove all the bad stuff, I wasn't necessarily thinking for myself, but there's so many people trying to find out how to discover their Panda issue. And so the question that's arisen so many times is, if I just got rid of everything and Google recrawled it and I do a site : check for my website and it now says 20 pages, have I essentially got rid of my Panda issue? If there's 20 quality pages left now.
Yeah, not really like that, because we do have to kind of refresh the whole algorithm and data first. And the thing to keep in mind is Panda is primarily a site-level algorithm. So it's not something where we'd say you remove 4,000 pages, therefore it doesn't apply to these anymore. It's really still essentially active for the rest of the site, so for those 20 pages that you might leave there. With regards to resolving this issue, it's more something where I recommend kind of taking a step back and looking at the website overall, and also getting a lot of feedback from peers, from users who are using your site, to make sure that you're really doing the right thing there. Because just deleting those pages and trying to rewrite the text isn't necessarily going to change the whole issue, because there's more to a website than just the text on the page. So the whole layout kind of comes into play, the whole feeling that a normal user would get when they come to your pages kind of comes into play, and is something that we try to at least approximate from our algorithms.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people with websites over the last sort of few years where, what they've tried to do is create as many pages as they can to try and catch as many keywords as they can. And you see it all the time. And that's where so many people are questioning, is that where my weak content is? And should I literally just ditch all of those things? And when it comes down to it, there really is only 100 pages left out of a couple of thousand. And that's, I think a lot of people have done that. And so the question applies to a large group of people.
Yeah, I mean, there are sites that spent a lot of time to just cover all these keywords and essentially create low-quality pages that match these keywords. And that's definitely something that we would pick up as a kind of a low-quality website in a case like that. But there's often more to it than just that. So just removing those pages where you have kind of low-quality text doesn't necessarily make your page a high-quality website, certainly, because we still have all of those other factors that we're picking up to try to understand how the quality of this website is. If you go through those 23 questions, there are a lot of things where we kind of try to approximate, at least algorithmically. And that's more than just the text on those pages, but obviously if you're creating thousands of pages just to match those keywords and the text on there is bad, then that's also going to be bad.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, John.
All right. How can Google know if a site is being attacked with negative SEO or the webmaster of the site actually uses bad SEO practices? That's always a tricky question. It's something where we work really hard to make sure our algorithms recognize this difference and that they can kind of understand the difference between these kind of things. And we definitely have the manual web spam team who's very aware of this kind of situation, who can also make a kind of a manual judgment in a case like that. So if they recognize that there are patterns involved that look like a competitor just went out and bought lots of links on Fiverr or wherever, then those are things the manual web spam team has a lot of experience with and kind of can pick up on. Whereas if it looks like this is something that the webmaster has been doing for a long time, then that's often a sign that when the web spam team takes a look at that they say, well, these issues have been around for quite some time, and either it's a competitor who's really trying to do something here for the long run and willing to take into account that maybe this website will actually be promoted for a couple of years during this time. But that's usually not the kind of situation that we see. So we try to look at a number of different things to recognize when something is actually negative SEO versus when something is more likely something that the webmaster did themselves. And overall, I think we're really good at that, and we pick up on a lot of signals that are kind of subtle. So that's something where I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. If you recognize situations where you think we're picking up something incorrectly, you're welcome to let us know about that so that we can take a better look. And if you're doing this for manual web spam reasons, if a web spam checker essentially from our side looked at your site and placed a manual action on your site, and you're saying, oh, this is definitely from negative SEO, then giving us that information in a reconsideration request is a great way to kind of bring that feedback back as well.
So, John, I did a poll to my, I guess, SEO base, and we had about 300 responses asking if they actually tried negative SEO and if it worked. And only 8.5% said it does not work, that they've tried it and it doesn't work. Whereas the other ones said they tried it and it works. 50% said it works all the time whenever they tried it, and 30% said it works sometimes. Does that concern you in terms of the perception from the SEO community about negative SEO working so well and people saying they actually tried it? Does that concern you at all?
It's tricky to say because we'd have to look at the individual cases. I mean, we see a lot of situations where people come to the forums or they come to us and say, hey, I'm being attacked by negative SEO, and we take a look at the details and we realize, well, either the things that are happening have no effect at all on the website, or we can tell that the things that are happening now are the same things that happened maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's probably not a competitor that's doing that. The tricky part is, of course, you never see the direct kind of connection between the negative SEO things and any change on a website. And often you'll see changes that are completely unrelated to each other. So
no, but what I'm asking is, even if it's right or wrong, the percentages of people saying they think it's possible or they have said it's possible and they've tried it themselves is pretty alarming. That perception, does that concern you?
You have a scary audience, Barry.
I have a scary audience.
Like all criminals that are attacking their competitors. You know, it's like to some extent you want to like have a fair business, right? If you're active online. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to look into a lot of those details. The hard part, of course, is the things that we see, that we analyze. They tend to show that a lot of these negative SEO things don't have any effect at all, or don't have a negative effect on that side at least. So it's hard to go from a general survey like that to saying there's something specific that's not working as it should. Because
no, I'm not asking about. I'm not saying that something's not working. I'm saying, it could be, it could not. I agree 100%. When you look into these things, you see the details. I agree with you on that. The question is the perception. Like I did another poll asking if people in the SEO community believe negative SEO is easier, and like 75% said, yeah, it's a lot easier. So the question is the perception that SEOs or webmasters have around negative SEO, and that is getting easier, and there's concern for that. Is that a concern for Google and them figuring out a way to maybe build tools or something that helps webmasters and SEOs maybe combat that or something like that? I mean, that's my concern. Not that it's actually possible, but do you guys realize there's a concern in the community, and are you addressing that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a topic since I've been doing stuff online, and from that point of view, it's not something new. It's not something that we're not aware of, something that we're not taking into account for the algorithms and the manual side. I think tools like the disavow tool make this a lot easier for the webmasters involved, in that if you notice that there's something crazy happening with links to your site, for example, then you can disavow those and move on. It's not that you're completely helpless against this kind of activity. And I think the stronger, more problematic kind of negative SEO, where people will actually go to a website and hack it and take over the whole server and all of that, that's probably more something that you'd want to handle on a legal basis, not directly like in Webmaster Tools.
Okay, thank you.
John, I do wonder whether or not some things are underestimated as well. You know, one of the things that I noticed years and years ago working for a web agency and various others was I was working in the travel industry and the car industry, and both industries took it upon themselves as part of their plans to actually use negative SEO as a tactic. And this was years ago. This is happening today in a big way. You know, a lot of the big industries are using this tactic.
I don't know. I don't think it has that much of an effect as people actually think. And I think if you're a webmaster working on a website and you have the choice between investing time and money on improving your website for the long run or temporarily harming a competitor's site, then a lot of times it just makes a lot more business sense to work on your website instead, because that's going to have a long-term positive effect. So it's...
This isn't a small scale. We're talking huge companies who, you know, I'm talking very, very, very large enterprises. They've got hundreds of webmasters working on their sites. You know, some of them with teams of 100 people in India, and very well-known brands that we know today. Okay, I'm not mentioning any names, but I know for a fact that this is what happens. You're saying that they need to spend more time on their own site. Having 3 people in a team of 100 working on something like this is not a big deal for them. The money being spent going to Fiverr and buying, you know, $5 things, it's not a lot of money being spent either. Now, whether or not it works or not is a different matter, but it's being done. It's an 100% a fact that it is being done. So, you know, it seemed to be a cheaper way to gain rankings on your competitors.
I don't agree with that. I think I can see that it's definitely being done, but whether or not it has a positive effect on your website's ranking, I totally think that we're catching a lot of those things. But yeah. I definitely take your concern, and we'll talk about that with the team as well. But I think overall we're really good at catching these kind of things appropriately. So I think there are a lot of things that are being done from an SEO point of view that probably don't make that much sense, and I imagine this is probably one of them, especially if you're a bigger company investing lots of money in this. That's probably a lot of money that you're just wasting. But people sometimes waste money for weird things. So.
In the car industry specifically, what people used to do was as soon as a website came available and somebody started to rank for it, they would immediately start negative SEOing it. So if you ever looked at the history of the website, right from day one, it looked bad. And so I don't know whether all of these factors all get taken into consideration. But I mean, there's been cases over the years where I've known people in the industry, they've opened up a site before they've even gone live. The site has been absolutely hammered by bad links. So, you know, when you look at history and you say, you know, what have they done? There's certain people that I know for fact have not done any of these things, and all of a sudden links are appearing left, right, and center. And we're going back 3 or 4 years now, but you know that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just totally being overestimated, and we're picking up on pretty much all of these things. I mean, there are definitely things we could be doing better on, but I think for most part, the issues that we see in that regard are handled appropriately. But let's take a look at some other questions.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Lots of other things happening. One of my sites had an algorithm penalty that I decided to move it to a new domain through a 301 redirect. All my ranking came back, but after a few weeks, it seems that the old domain penalty has been redirected to a new domain. And now what should I do to recover it? Essentially, what you need to do to recover these kind of issues is clean up the issues. Just moving everything to a new domain just essentially forwards them to the new domain. So that's not really a resolution of the issues that you're having there. So really taking a step back, looking at the issues that you might be seeing there, and actually cleaning that up is probably what I'd recommend doing there. John, we don't appear to be getting real-time stats for content experiments anymore. Based on what we see with internal tools, has this changed recently? I'm not really sure what What do you mean with content experiments? Tom, are you here? Is this Tom? This is one Tom. Maybe not the right Tom.
Hi, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm referring to A/B tests through Google Analytics.
Okay. Yeah. That'd probably be in Analytics, though. Then that wouldn't be in Webmaster Tools, right?
No, not Webmaster Tools.
Okay. Yeah. So I can't really help with analytics questions. You probably need to check in the analytics forum or with someone from the analytics team on that. So I don't really have any insight on that. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
How long before the next Panda refresh? We tend not to pre-announce these things. I think Panda is an algorithm that runs more regularly now. So that's something where I imagine you'll probably see updates every couple of weeks, every couple of months, that kind of time frame. I've had a Panda penalization for thin content and rental car industry. It seems to have affected several websites in this industry in Spain. I've just fixed with great content, but how much time can it take to get out of this penalty? So generally, Panda is a quality algorithm. So if you had a lot of thin content on your pages, that's something cleaning up would be a good idea to actually do there. How long it takes is hard to say because on the one hand, we have to recrawl and re-index all of these pages, which can take differently. So some pages we recrawl every couple of days. Other pages we recrawl every couple of weeks or even every couple of months. So sometimes that takes a while for us to actually update it from a technical point of view. But then we have to kind of recompile all the signals that we use to run the Panda algorithm for, and then we have to do an update of the Panda algorithm data to actually show that in the search results. So if you've just now cleaned up this issue and you've significantly cleaned out all of this thin content, then I imagine you're looking at something like maybe a couple of months for this data to be updated again. So it's not something you'd see from one day to the next. It really takes a while to actually be reprocessed, recalculated, and updated in the visible search results.
John, for sites with penalties, algorithmic penalties, does Google crawl the sites slower or less often because they have a penalty? Like with specifically Panda, like low quality content, would they crawl less often?
Usually not. So usually we treat crawling as a kind of a technical thing where we'd say we need to update this data regularly, and it doesn't really matter how we kind of see the quality of the website. On the other hand, if a website is such bad quality that it doesn't make sense for us to even crawl at all, then that's kind of one step that you could be seeing there. But if it's just seen as kind of lower quality content, we crawl it essentially just the same as we would normal content.
John, would using robots.txt to block a specific large set of pages be a problem, or would it speed it up?
Would it speed it up? Sometimes it could. So for the most part, we're able to crawl websites as quickly as we want to crawl them. So we're not limited by the website, by the bandwidth to the website, or anything like that. Sometimes we are limited by the bandwidth to the website. So in cases like that, if you robot a part of your website out so that we don't have to consider crawling it, then that can help us to kind of focus on the other URLs. But for the most part, we don't need to worry about that. We can pick up as much as we need anyway. So it's really something where if you're stuck in a situation where you think that Google can't crawl as much as it would like to from your website, it probably makes more sense to just make sure that your website is faster so that it can be crawled faster.
Took it upon themselves as part of their plans.
Whoops.
Yeah, so that being the case, if you were to use robot.txt, how long would it take before Google kind of removed that section, maybe, rather than using the URL removal tool, if you were to use robots? Because sometimes there's wildcards, and you need to use wildcards in order, and you can't do that with the URL removal tool, which is something else I think I mentioned in another question. Is there room for that to come along? If we've got the power to do it in robots.txt, why not give us the same power to do it in Webmaster Tools?
So with the robots.txt file, we actually have to try to recrawl those URLs before we kind of put them into the roboted state. So if you switch on a robots.txt that disallows everything today, then we're not going to remove all the content from your website today. We're going to wait until we try to recrawl those pages and see, oh, now this page is blocked. So we'll kind of take out the content and just keep that page indexed with the URL alone, maybe with anchors to that page, those kind of things. So that's not something that would happen from one day to the next. That would kind of take the normal crawl cycle to be updated there. And since it takes a normal crawl cycle, if you just want to remove it from the search results, putting a no index on there, serving a 404, both of those would be just as quick. The URL removal tool itself essentially just hides those pages from the search results. So it's not that it removes them from their index. It just prevents them from being shown in the search results. So it's subtly different in that regard. With regards to wildcards for the URL removal tool, it's something where we notice that people tend to mess up a lot with wildcards. And if we give them wildcards in the removal tools, then it's very easy to kind of take out a big part of the site accidentally and not actually realize that they're doing this. So we try to focus primarily on clear folders, domains, your main website essentially, and make it so that whatever is removed is really obvious to the user what's actually kind of hidden in the search results during that time.
If we have the power to do it via robots.txt, though, it's kind of the same thing. Could you not put another level of security in that says, are you really sure you know what you're doing?
Well, if you ask the webmaster if they know what they're doing, they always know what they're doing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know what you're doing, and you probably make mistakes from time to time as well. The same thing applies to me. So that's something where
another suggestion.
Yeah.
How about if you actually had like you have the testing tool for the robots.txt in Webmaster Tools, how about it actually gives you a list of all of the pages that would be removed if you use this tool? So it'd say, you've got 4,000 pages indexed, here's a list of them. If you use these wildcards, this is what will be removed. And then people will actually be able to identify what it is. They go through the list and go, oh no, I'm not happy with that, and they won't do it. It's kind of a simple tool. It might be very powerful.
I mean, that's a possibility, but I guess primarily the removal tool was really meant for situations where you have an urgent need to remove something really quickly. And usually those aren't the situations where you say, I need to take out this subtle section of my website, but rather where you say, I need to take out everything under this subdirectory or everything on my whole host because of something really critical and urgent that happened that I need to have hidden in the search results. So that's usually something where the robots.txt is kind of different because it's really more focusing on the crawling side rather than on an actual urgent removal.
Yeah.
With the robots.txt, the other advantage there is that if we see a lot of links to those pages, we can still show it in the search results. And sometimes these pages rank first in the search results, even though they're blocked by the robots.txt file, just because we think they're really important, because we think that they're really useful for the user. We see a lot of links to those pages. Sometimes we see that with our own pages as well, where maybe we'll have a login page that's blocked by the robots.txt file, but they're looking for the specific tool, and searching for it shows that tool in the search results. It also shows the description is blocked by the robots.txt, but it's still available for the user. Whereas if you use the removal tool, then it will be gone completely. There's no way that it would be visible at all for the user.
So the robots.txt won't treat it like a no-follow as well?
Yes, it'll be like a no-follow because we can't actually see the content there. We can't see the links on that page.
I didn't mean no follow. I meant no index. Sorry. It won't.
We wouldn't treat it as no index because we essentially just can't crawl it. We don't know what's there. It might be something really important. It might be something less important. So we have to focus on other aspects that we can pick up on to kind of show it or not show it in the search results.
Gotcha. Thanks, John.
All right. Hi, John. We recently lost review-rich snippets in the search results for IT domain. Markup is OK in the structured data testing tool and identical to other domains where the snippets show. What can we do? I took a quick look at your site, Tom, and the main issues that we're seeing there is that our algorithms kind of feel that the quality of the site overall isn't as great as it could be. So that's something where maybe the different ccTLD versions of your site are kind of subtly different, or maybe there are other aspects involved there that you might want to take a look at. But for rich snippets, we do take a look at the technical side of things. That's basically the foundation that you have to have correct first. And then if there are issues from a quality side or from a policy side, those can play a role as well. So that's something that's happening with your site there. So kind of taking a step back and looking at your site overall to see what you can do to improve that would be a good idea. Mom-and-pop e-commerce sites hit by Panda 4.0. Are features like responsive design, product reviews, product swatches going to help? SEO professionals are telling me to add text. So having text is always a good idea. I didn't actually look at your website, so it's hard for me to make any general recommendations. But generally, when it comes to Panda, which is a quality algorithm, we try to understand the quality of the website and how it kind of works together with users, how the content is there, what we can pick up on as general quality signals. So what I'd recommend doing there is taking a look at the blog post from Amit Singhal maybe 2 or 3 years back now with 23 questions you can ask yourself regarding high-quality websites, and going through that with a group of people who aren't associated with your website. And usually when you do that, they come up with a lot of good ideas on things where they think maybe your website isn't as good as it could be, or maybe there are specific areas where you could improve on. So that's essentially what I'd recommend doing there, really taking a step back, looking at the quality of your site overall, and making sure that you're doing all of the right things. With regards to text, like I mentioned before, just having text on a page doesn't necessarily make it high quality. So really making sure that everything around your site is the best it can be is something I recommend doing there. Googlebot executes JavaScript, but not the Google Analytics JavaScript, right? Because that would inflate traffic numbers. Yes, I believe that's the case, that we don't execute the analytics JavaScript. We also try not to execute things that we can recognize as being kind of tracking scripts from other sites. So if we can recognize that, we'll try to block that. If it's blocked by the robots.txt file, of course, we can't pick it up and process it either. So that's something where we're working to try to make sure that we're doing the right thing with the JavaScript there. We have an issue with bad links on one of our websites, but we don't have a manual action, so we can't make a reconsideration request. Is there any way to get in touch with Google and let them review our link profile manually? You can post in a help forum, which is something where we generally go through and try to look at. The thing with algorithmic changes on our side is that we don't have a way to kind of take out these algorithmic actions. It's essentially something where if there's a manual action, you can resolve that with the web spam team. You can take action to clean that up. With algorithmic changes, you kind of have to let the algorithm run through that. So if there's anything specific that you think we're picking up on incorrectly algorithmically, letting us know through the help forums or contacting us directly is probably a good idea. But we can't kind of push a button and free your site from any kind of algorithmic change that's happening on our side.
Where do we find that help form?
The help forum. I can send you a link. Let me just pick it up.
Okay. Thank you.
It's essentially just the normal Google Webmaster help forum. Let me post it in the chat. So that's a possibility. You can also post on Google+, maybe add us on Google+, and we can take a look there as well. Okay. We are having some issue facing to get Google to index our site. Here's a screenshot. As you can see, 3 sitemaps are starting to kick in for indexing, but 1 sitemap is not starting to index. I'd have to take a look at the specifics there to kind of see what specifically is happening there. In general, with sitemaps, it's important that you submit the URLs that are 100% the same as the ones that you actually have on your website, that you use on your website, that you want to have indexed. So for example, if you submit a sitemap with all URLs with a trailing slash, and within your website you link to the URLs without the trailing slash, then we kind of see the mismatch there, and we wouldn't think that these URLs are actually indexed. The content itself might be indexed, but since you're using different URLs, we're not going to count that as being indexed in the sitemaps feature in Webmaster Tools. We've taken down many pages over the years, giving 410 or 404 responses, but external sites still have links. How can we permanently remove these URLs from the index so that we get beyond the list of 1,000 in the crawl errors download file? So you can't remove them completely from us trying to crawl them. Usually if we've seen a page before and it turns into 404 or 410, we'll still periodically try to recrawl those pages, and we'll periodically bring those back up in the crawl errors section in Webmaster Tools. The good part here is that we try to prioritize the list in the crawl errors section in Webmaster Tools so that those URLs that are actually relevant to you usually should be on top of the list there. And if you only see URLs in the crawl error section that are completely random, that are completely out of date, that you haven't used for quite some time, then that essentially means that we haven't found anything critical when we crawl your website. And it's normal for us to see crawl errors when crawling a website. That's essentially a sign that you're doing it technically right. So I wouldn't try to suppress those in any way, but rather just look at that list. If you see nothing really critical on top, then you probably won't find anything really critical in the rest of the list or below the first 1,000 that we show there. We use Trustpilot. Oh, wait, wrong link. How can Google detect a negative SEO attack? I think we looked at this one. We use Trustpilot to gather reviews. I was wondering how we get our 5-star rating for our services in the search results. Any help on this would be greatly appreciated. So when it comes to the reviews in rich snippets, it's important for us that you use reviews that you've collected directly on your site itself. So if you're collecting these reviews on some third-party sites, then we probably wouldn't be showing that for your site. We'd be showing that on their site when they review your products. So from that point of view, depending on what you're trying to achieve, it might make sense to collect these reviews directly on your website itself instead of using a third-party site. Or if you're using these third-party reviews to show up in the search results as well, then maybe that's fine to just keep them there. Our client server doesn't support htaccess. Java server, how can we solve redirections that Google likes? Is there an alternative for 404 errors to redirect without 301 or htaccess that Google likes? It's tricky, so I think most Java servers should support some kind of redirection, and that's essentially what we're looking for when you're moving from one URL to another. We really want to see a strong sign that when that URL is accessed, it always sends us directly to the new URL so that we can follow that and actually focus on the new URL. And if you can't do any kind of redirect there, then that's really hard for us because we see both of these URLs. Maybe we see the same content on both of these URLs, and it's hard for us to make a decision which one we should actually index. Some things that you could do is look at perhaps using the rel canonical to let us know about your choice of preferred URLs. If you're moving the content completely from one URL to another one and you don't have it on the old URL, then of course you don't have the rel canonical there. So I really try to work with your web developer to make sure that you can actually set up some kind of a redirect from the old URLs to the new ones. Even with Java servers, that's something that should be possible. I mean, a lot of websites have Java servers, Java backends, and they do redirects as well. So that should be possible somehow.
John.
Yes.
Hi. Hey, I've got a question related to moving sites as well. And this company I was asked about, there's two companies merging together. They've got two older, fairly seasoned sites. So they are building a new site that they want to merge everything over to. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about best practices, because like their idea was to maybe do it slowly over a period of time so that they didn't lose the customers or something like that, but then they said they also wanted to keep all their SEO benefits and stuff. So I was like, well, that may not really work so well, because if you do it page by page, then it's not really, and it's not really best for the user, because the sites are not going to work well. So do you think moving one site to the other, or just both of them to the new location all at the same time? Any suggestions on best practice for how something like that might be done? I also know that frequently on site moves that accompany a site rebuild, there is usually a deprecation in rankings. I think a lot of that has to do with Google just trying to understand the new structure as well.
Yeah, so normal site moves from one domain to another are getting a lot easier for us because we can recognize that kind of situation a lot easier. And if you give us information like through Webmaster Tools saying, I've moved from this domain to that domain, then that makes it a lot easier for us, especially if there's this real one-to-one mapping there. We can start to crawl maybe a little bit faster to pick up these changes and kind of send all the signals over as quickly as possible. That's essentially the easier variation, and like you mentioned, even there, sometimes sites see significant changes in rankings, at least for a while. So if you're going to a more complex situation where you have two websites that are essentially being merged into a third, then that's something where I imagine you'll definitely see fluctuations for quite some time, because we have to process them individually on a per URL basis, go through, find those redirects, send those signals individually over to the new domain, find a way to merge those signals from those two domains, and that's not going to be something that's going to be trivial on our side, and probably not something where our algorithms would recognize that as any kind of a normal site move. So we'd have to really handle that on a per URL basis. With regards to doing it all at once or kind of staging it, I think doing it all at once makes it a little bit easier for us because we recognize this strong change within these websites, and we can start working on processing those signals as quickly as possible. Whereas if you're doing this in a staged way, then we'll see some URLs redirecting, some URLs not redirecting. We won't really know which signals we can keep on the old domain, which ones we should send over to the new domain. That makes it a lot harder for us. So doing it if possible, all at the same time makes a lot of sense. But even there, if you're merging two sites, it's probably going to be a rocky transition from those two sites ranking separately to one site just ranking. Even if
Do you think maybe doing one at a time, you know, one and then another a few weeks later, might be any improvement?
I don't know. It's always going to be a tricky situation. So doing it from one domain to a new domain is probably easier for us to process. But even there, it's not going to be a matter of a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It's going to take a bit of time to really update all of those signals. So if you want to move like from one domain to another domain, and then a half a year later kind of send the rest over, that's going to be quite some time. I don't know if you have that time. Personally, I just bite the bullet and really do it at a time where traditionally maybe the websites don't have that much traffic. If you can choose, maybe a season where there's traditionally kind of a downturn on the website, not many people searching for it, not much traffic happening on the website, that's always a good time to do that. Sometimes you can't choose when this happens. So I just find a way to make sure that technically everything's handled correctly, and then just bite the bullet and actually do that. Usually the hard work is really in making sure that technically everything is working correctly, making sure you have all the redirects there, making sure that the new site structure, which is a combination of these both websites, actually works well. That's already a lot of work, and that's probably going to take a little bit of back and forth until you have it all finalized. All right, there was another question in between. Who was that? Nikilesh?
Yeah, I had a question about iframe embeds. So just like SlideShare and YouTube, we offer embedding of some of our content. And I was wondering how Google treats that. So if some other page embeds my content, is that treated as a link? Can it be impacted by Penguin?
The good part. Let me just move you together. So depending on how the embed is, we might see a link there. A lot of sites, when they offer an embed, they include a link there to the resource directly. So that's something, depending on what you provide as an embed, could play a role there. Depending on how we can crawl that embedded content, it kind of depends on whether or not we could theoretically include it in that website or not. A lot of times the embedded content is blocked by robots.txt, so we wouldn't be able to pick that up and include it in that website. But depending on the type of embed you have there, that's something we either pick up the link or not, if you have a link there or not. If it's just an iframe, then we wouldn't treat that as a link.
Right, so it's like a YouTube embed where it's an iframe that has a special URL for that content. And if you go to that page, the URL that is iframed, you will see that the rel canonical points to the actual page.
I don't think we treat that as a link. So that's, if it's just an iframe, especially because you can't add like a rel nofollow there, that's not something where we'd say this is the same or equivalent to a normal HTML link that we could find otherwise. But like I mentioned, a lot of sites, when they offer their embed code, they also have a link to the content directly in the embed code. So that's usually the place where we would pick up those links.
Okay, so that's good. So then I cannot be impacted by Penguin then, on the bright side.
Well, at least from those iframes, yeah. I mean, if you have great content that people want to embed, then that's always a good sign, right?
Right.
Okay, John.
Yeah.
I have another question, if I can. I don't know if it's a good time. Should I ask another time, or I should ask? All right. So Miley referenced at XMX events last week that you shouldn't really use like script tag or stuff like that, because that kind of is a flag in terms of hiding content. Not necessarily the script tag, but maybe using certain things that would hide content. And it's pretty much, she said, use the word automatic, like red flag or something like that. I tried to get more information out of her about that, but I don't think she's really. I don't know how involved she is in the Webmaster team versus other teams. So since you're very involved in that area, could you talk a little bit about that? What's like an automatic red flag in terms of hiding content, maybe? Like things webmasters maybe should stay away from, using no script, no tags or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where traditionally we've seen a lot of spammers misuse those tags and use them to hide content, use them to kind of pseudo-cloak to Googlebot. So traditionally, we've been very kind of reluctant to treat that content as something that's really relevant for the page, because if it's not directly visible in a browser, then, I don't know, it's probably not that important for us, so we might not actually use it that well. So from that point of view, I try to avoid putting anything there that you find is important for your website. And there are sometimes technical reasons to use these tags, but if you are putting anything there that you think is important for your site, then that's probably not the best place for that. I'd probably just put that into the content normally so that users and Googlebot see it normally. It's a lot of these things kind of have evolved over time in that they're normal HTML technique that makes sense to use sometimes, but spammers pick them up and try to abuse them in weird ways. So our algorithms tend to be a little bit more reluctant in trusting them completely. And if we can't trust them completely, and if they're good alternatives for you to use, then I'd recommend staying away from them if you don't actually need them from a technical point of view.
So when she said automatic, like red flag, what does that? That means you're not using the content in there, or that means like it gets put into a bucket where manual Google spam action superheroes go and check it out?
We try to avoid doing something where some system automatically flags content and someone has to manually review that, because there's just so much content on the internet that would never scale from our point of view. But like I mentioned, if the algorithms are reluctant to use this content, if the engineers that are creating these algorithms see that they've been misused for spammy reasons for quite some time, and a lot of the spam is still online, then the algorithms are kind of going to be really picky about using that content for anything useful. So that's essentially where we'd say, you can use this for technical reasons if you absolutely need to use it, but if there's something on your site that you want to have indexed and crawled and visible in search results normally, then just use the normal ways to actually show that.
So specifically, we should try to avoid the no script tag. What else would you recommend us trying to avoid?
I wouldn't say try to avoid using it, but try to avoid using it for any content that you find is important for your website.
Okay. So that includes a no script tag. Anything else?
I'm sure there are other things that I can't think of at the moment.
Okay.
But I mean, a lot of these things are kind of obvious in that if you're a webmaster and you're working on your website and you have something important that you want to have crawled and indexed and shown in the search results, then you're going to try to put it on your pages so that users see it as well. So from that point of view, something like the no script tag probably isn't the best place to put your important content.
Okay, thank you.
John, I've got a quick question about quality spam we've seen, or spam that we've seen over since Panda, the last Panda. I'm going to post a link and not talk about the brand itself, but it's an example of what we're seeing. There seems to be a more sites using statistics that are basically made up and ranking well because of them. The link I posted in the chat there is an example of a company where we spoke to over 20 people in our industry and asked them whether or not any of the data is correct about them, and it's not. And this company has now done very well out of since Panda 4.0 and was doing so before. But the reality is that these statistics sites, the ones that were gathering data based on where's your domain hosted and all these kind of things, they're getting smarter, and they're working out how to put better data in there to have better quality. But at the end of the day, the data itself is garbage. And So and what they're doing is they're trying to rank well for lots of keywords in the hope that you will then log in and correct the information about your own company in order for them to have correct statistics. Kind of almost like a bullying sort of behavior. What's your stance on businesses like that? And are you guys aware that companies are now kind of just making stuff up?
Well, companies have been making stuff up since forever. So we kind of have to assume that this is happening. A lot of the Whois sites have been generating these kind of things for a while now. From our point of view, a lot of this is automatically generated content, and we try to treat it as such. Sometimes we do a better job at catching it. Sometimes we don't do that well at catching it. So feedback like this is definitely useful for us to kind of take a look at to see what these sites are doing. But sometimes they're also doing something that's kind of useful. But it really depends a bit on what exactly is happening behind the scenes, how much of this is just auto-generated or just randomized or even random content. And based on that, we kind of have to take a look at that either manually or find ways to algorithmically catch these kind of issues. But it's definitely good feedback to have, good example URL to kind of look at with the team as well. All right, we have 1 minute left. Who wants a last question?
John, if I may squeeze in a last question. It's about comment spam that I've seen on my website for the last several months now. And it's a different kind of comment spam in the sense that it doesn't have any links. But the comment itself is very generic. It's like, I'm so glad I found your blog and I'll come back again. And when I Google some of those phrases, I find the exact same comment left on 100 other websites. So the question is, how much importance does Google's algorithm attach to comments on a web page? Because on the one hand, it's good to have good comments. On the other hand, it's comments and people don't have good grammar. So how do you tackle that?
So from our point of view, if it's hosted on your website, it's your content. So we don't differentiate that much with regards to who it looks like might have written this content. If it's hosted on your pages, if it's low-quality content, that's something we associate with your website. So in an extreme case where you have a short blog post that's just like 2 or 3 sentences, and then you have 5 pages of really low-quality comments, then when we look at that page overall, we see all of this low-quality content, and we're saying, well, overall this page doesn't really look that great. We might recognize that it looks like other people are leaving comments there, but essentially it's on your website. You've agreed to publish this content. You're promoting this essentially on your website. So that's something where if you see this low-quality content being added to your site, I try to take action to kind of clean that up, even if there are no links attached to it.
Hey, John, sorry, I lost all power there for some reason. I just have one other little point to add to the question I was asking, was that in the last Hangout we talked about another poor quality site, and almost the instant that we talked about it, it received a boost. And I was wondering, if people with high profiles, high Google Plus profiles like yourself and others, if they view a site, does it actually give it more of a boost for some reason?
No.
Okay.
That would be a little too easy to gain.
Yeah. Okay. Just seems strange then that the site that we were talking about that was specifically poor is ranking even better. So, okay, thanks.
That would be unrelated to that, yeah. All right. So with that, we're out of time. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for all your questions. And I hope to see you guys again in one of the future Hangouts.
Thanks,
Wish
John.
you guys a great
Enjoy
week.
the World Cup.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Yeah. See you next week.